Dear friends, welcome to another episode of The Informant. Today we dive into a critical and evolving debate within Switzerland, a nation known for its steadfast neutrality since 1515, as it begins to reassess its defense policies in light of rising political pressures and the growing threat posed by Russia, especially after the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. But before we get started, make sure you're subscribed to the channel with notifications turned on. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. Switzerland, a country renowned for its long-standing tradition of neutrality, is now reconsidering its defensive stance due to increasing political pressures and the threats emerging from Russia, particularly following the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. A recent report suggests that Switzerland should bolster its cooperation with the EU and NATO by proposing a common defense strategy and increasing military spending to 1% of its GDP by 2030. Switzerland's neutral stance has limited its ability to export arms and collaborate with countries supporting Ukraine. The report recommends lifting the ban on arms re-export and tightening ties with NATO and the EU, without fully abandoning neutrality. In September 1515, Francis I, the newly crowned King of France, supported by the powerful Republic of Venice, faced a formidable force led by the Swiss Confederation at the Battle of Marignano, just 16 kilometers from Milan. The Swiss army, known for being the most formidable infantry in Europe at the time, was caught off guard by the presence of a powerful French ally, the Landsknechts, German mercenaries renowned for their combat prowess. The battle raged on for nearly 2 days, with the Swiss suffering twice as many casualties as the French, ultimately leading to the French king's victory and the occupation of Milan. This crushing defeat prompted the Swiss to sign the perpetual peace with France and the Duke of Milan in November 1516, marking Switzerland's first significant neutrality pact, which remained largely intact until the French invasion 282 years later. In 1815, shortly before Napoleon Bonaparte's final defeat, the major European powers convened at the Congress of Vienna and agreed that Switzerland would remain a permanently neutral country. Since then, for nearly 210 years, and through 2 devastating world wars that ravaged Europe, Switzerland maintained its strict neutrality, refusing to align directly with any belligerent nation. Apart from a French invasion at the end of the 17th century, Switzerland managed to stay neutral for over 5 centuries, something that Vladimir Putin is now threatening to change. When Putin launched his full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022, he shattered a kind of unspoken understanding in Europe, one that held that no country would start a new war of expansion and territorial conquest on the continent. Putin's actions, which blatantly aimed at territorial expansion, broke this understanding, a fundamental pillar of Switzerland's post-World War II neutrality. Contrary to popular belief, Swiss neutrality has always been adaptable, evolving after World War I and undergoing significant reform following World War II. It was during this post-war reform that the Swiss decided to maintain their long-standing neutrality, provided that no similar threats to those of World War II re-emerged in Europe. However, this is precisely what happened in February 2022, when Putin invaded Ukraine, aiming to annex new territories for Russia. For many Swiss politicians and military leaders, Russia's invasion of Ukraine has destroyed the very foundation on which Switzerland's post-World War II neutrality was built. In response, on Thursday, August 29th, a group of Swiss politicians, diplomats, analysts, and military officials recommended that the Swiss government relax its neutrality policy and seek closer ties with both the European Union and NATO. According to the report published by this group, Russia's invasion of Ukraine necessitates a re-evaluation of Switzerland's neutrality policy, considering the new geopolitical landscape that Putin has created in Europe. It's worth noting that 2 other nations famous for their neutrality policies, Sweden and Finland, abandoned their neutrality and joined NATO in direct response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Much like Switzerland is beginning to do now, Sweden and Finland declared that Putin had dismantled the pillars on which their neutrality policies were built. In essence, Swedes and Finns concluded that if Putin could invade Ukraine with flimsy excuses to mask his true aim of territorial expansion, He could just as easily do the same to Sweden and Finland, both of which are in close proximity to Russian territory, with Finland sharing a border over 800 miles long. Although Switzerland is far removed and surrounded by NATO member countries, the Swiss share the same concerns that led Sweden and Finland to abandon their neutrality policies. The first practical step in this direction, advocated by this Swiss group, involves lifting the ban on arms sales. Since the onset of Russia's invasion, Switzerland has halted arms sales to countries allied with Ukraine, aiming to prevent Swiss weapons from being used in the conflict. This stance has begun to shift very recently, with Switzerland agreeing to supply spare parts for Leopard 1 tanks damaged in combat in Ukraine. However, the Swiss continue to refuse to provide munitions, such as the 35mm shells used in the German Gepard air defense system. The group of Swiss experts made it clear that Switzerland's neutrality policy should not be simply abandoned, but rather adapted, just as it was after World War II, which allowed Switzerland to remain neutral throughout the Cold War. However, this Swiss group argues that the current geopolitical context is far worse and more severe than during the Cold War, making it necessary and urgent for Switzerland's neutrality to be revised and reformed, a process that many believe will inevitably lead to a partial relaxation or abandonment of a neutrality policy that has been in place for over 500 years. And all of this is due to Vladimir Putin's expansionist ambitions. If you value independent journalism and want to support our work, consider buying us a coffee through the QR code on the screen. Your contribution is essential for us to continue bringing quality analysis and information. Stay tuned for more updates, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for the latest analyses and insights on the world's most urgent geopolitical issues.